Bienvenidos a Anatomía Verde, con Daniela Barragán y María Fernanda Urneo, un espacio para hablar de ambiente y conservación, donde la ciencia se difunde de forma sencilla y las soluciones se convierten en acciones.
Hello, hi, hola, gente.
Hola, estamos en vivo y esta va a ser una nuevo mes, nueva entrevista, nuevo tema en Anatomía Verde y esta vez vamos a tener una entrevista bilingüe. Así que la vamos a manejar en inglés porque si bien Jennifer vive en Chile, todavía no manejamos bien el español, le vamos a poner de tarea, así que vamos a manejar toda la entrevista en inglés, pero van a poder, se va a ir traduciendo abajo al español, así que espero que no haya ningún problema. Así que nada, voy a dar la bienvenida en español, Bienvenida Dani, welcome Jennifer, so nice to be here with you again.
Yes. Hola Fer, ¿cómo estás? Perdón. Saludando, hola Fer, hola a la gente que nos está escuchando y súper contenta de estar como siempre. La semana pasada me perdí la entrevista, pero ya estoy aquí. Hello Jennifer, I'm so exciting today to be with you. So, welcome.
Welcome Jennifer. So we are switching to English so that I think you can understand Spanish, right?
Más o menos, sí.
Okay, let's do this. So we're switching to English, and we're so happy to have you here, Jennifer. Jennifer is the lead, global lead for WWF Cities, which is I'm not going to use the acronyms of WWF, but it's one of the many areas that WWF works. I worked with Jennifer when I was in WWF, so I'm happy to see you again. She is in Chile now, but she works for Sweden and for the Initiative of Cities and Chile. So welcome. I'm so happy to see you, Jennifer. It's been years.
Likewise. Yes, it's glad to see what you're up to now. This is very exciting.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. I'm glad to be able to interview you today. I think it's a difficult topic for citizens to understand. But here in Green Anatomy, we like to inform people about environmental problems. So welcome. And we want to start with our first question, Fer.
Yes. So let's go from the big thing. Okay. So people want to understand what's climate change. And I know it's not easy. So let's do it. I know you're good at this. So let's do it really briefly so that people can understand where do we start and where does this interview go to. So what is climate change?
Yes. I really want to learn about this.
So yes, I mean, you ask a big question in wanting a simple answer, and that's a real challenge. But I did a little research on this because I think, trying to make something as complex as climate change meaningful for individuals and understandable, it's always good to kind of connect the dots. So climate change is more or less a change in average temperatures and rainfall in a region over a period of time. But of course, that's what it is, but where does it come from? And I think, basically the easiest way to say would be that since the Industrial Revolution, we have started to produce much more emissions than our planet could take in. So whether it's from industrial processes or the way we design our cities, the food we eat, cows, for example, produce a lot of methane, which is a very intensive greenhouse gas. When we cut down our forests and the burning of forests, these are all some of the contributions. And there are so many things. What is climate change? It's a little bit of everything. It's everything that we do that has some sort of impact on our planet and the collective contributions, which are now seeing a shift in our planet's temperatures, in our rainfall patterns, in extreme weather, and so many things. But I think probably what is more interesting is what can we do about it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So that's maybe the next question, because one of the things, you do hear me, right?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
It's a little robotic, but I hear you.
Okay, great. So
Okay.
one of the things that I think it's interesting to understand is that climate change, yes, it has been in the world, in our history for many, many years. It's a normal process. The not normal thing is the I don't have the word in English, but the velocidad which is taken is too fast. The movement is going
the
too
velocity.
fast. Yeah,
Yes.
it's going too fast, and so we cannot adapt, right, Jennifer? That's the basic thing. So climate change is something pretty normal in the history of the universe, in the planet, but not what is happening right now, which is at a fast pace, right?
Absolutely. I mean, there's this famous diagram called the hockey stick diagram, and we see a shift kind of every few hundred years in where the temperature is going. And, there are periods of colder winters, there are periods of warmer summers. That is normal. But what we've seen in, I think, the last 100-some years is an acceleration of the temperature changes, but also in the carbon in our atmosphere. And this is showing us that there is a man-made contribution to this impact. It is not just about the natural cycles. It's an acceleration of what we are seeing now.
Okay.
The impact is heavy. The storms, hurricanes, extreme weather events. So that's the result.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that question. Are you asking, how do we go from the global?
No, right now, yeah. So yeah, Danny was just saying that those are the results. So we are experiencing heavier rainfalls, as you said, and hurricanes. And we have right now, I understand there's like a fifth thunderstorm or hurricane in the area, which was not normal in the States. So it's something that they are not prepared for. So that's the global thing, right? And so we can then go to the next question, which was exactly how do we, so this is very intangible because so people say, that's happening in the States. Yeah, so maybe it's warming up the oceans, maybe all of those things are happening, but where am I, what's happening? So how do we turn it into something that comes to a tangible thing, to a local thing? How do we explain and how do we act from where we are? Because people do not understand how to connect that very scientific thing to the daily life.
Absolutely. I mean, I think this for me is what is most interesting and most exciting, because climate change in and of itself is so complex. It's about countries coming together, negotiating. It's about companies setting targets. It's about, long scales of time where we think, what are the changes going to be in 100 years, in 50 years, in 10 years? But the other key question is what is happening now, and especially now in the places where we live. So when it comes to cities, since today, 55% of our global population live in cities. And in Latin America, this rate is the highest globally. I think it's between 70 or 80%, but it's much higher than the global average. So, we have become, in many senses, an urban species. This does not mean that we're not connected to the environment. This does not mean that everything from the air we breathe to the water we drink to the food we eat, all of that is dependent on the natural environment. But of course, we are living in cities, increasingly so. So what are the choices that we make, and how can our individual choices connect to this? How do we move around in our city? Do we take the bus? Do we take the bike? Is it safe to do so? Do we move around in a car? What are the impacts of that? What food do we eat? I know you guys are working a lot with food choices as well, and our food choices are extremely important in terms of our climate impact. with meat in particular, beef having a very heavy carbon impact. Many scientists seeing that a flexitarian or low meat diet is probably the smartest way to go. Of course, if you're ready and willing, going all the way to a vegetarian or vegan diet is definitely good for the environment. But it's also about the energy that we consume in our homes, in our offices. Is it greener? Is it efficient? Some of these those are how we can contribute, but also how are our cities already impacted? Cities already today are warming at faster rates, up to 2 or 3 times faster than the rural areas around them. This is something called urban heat island. And it's happening because we have more pavement in our cities, more buildings.
Oh.
So collectively, this creates a higher temperature. Also, air pollution is a huge challenge, also connected to climate change, because it's some of the same emissions that contribute to air pollution and to climate change. In cities globally, 90% of cities are already impacted by air pollution. So this is a huge challenge that is affecting us today, now, in our homes, for our children, in our communities.
What can be the quick solution that you think that we can do at home, for example?
Sure. I mean, I think the quickest solution is really to think about what we eat, because we do that between 2 and 3 times a day. And it's not just about, become a vegetarian tomorrow, but reduce a little bit the meat from your diet. Find new alternatives. There's so many options, especially in the city, that where you don't have to give up. It's not about giving things up. It's about improving your overall healthy lifestyles. It's about trying new choices. Also, food waste is a huge contributor to carbon emissions. So if you eat whatever you choose, whether it's a meat-based diet or a vegetarian-based diet, but reducing your food waste and your food loss, because I believe globally it's about one third of food is wasted. So this is a huge thing. Now, not all of this is up to the individual. A lot of this is about the food, the global food is lost along the way. But then again, here's especially maybe in a context like Quito, a justification for eating local and supporting local farmers.
I had a question on that. Yeah, I have a question about that, because that's something that always comes to my mind. And I think we talked about this many times when we worked together, was that what was the role of the city? Because the city as a whole has obviously the mayor and all of the public policy that is around. And I just had this week, I had a Twitter fight, we would say. It wasn't a fight. We were talking about it. We were arguing this. But some people say it's about taking good choices as a consumer. And I was saying, yes, but we need also public policy to back that up. So what is the real role of a city, or the structure of a city, for this change? And where are the red dots, the alarming dots of a city in which we should concentrate and we should push for public policy?
Yeah, very good question. Well, I mean, climate change, the urgency to address climate change is kind of everyone has to be involved at some level. We are hopeful in the climate policy world that we can half global emissions next 10 years. This is what we need to do. And then we need to half those emissions again. And by 2050, we want to get to what we're calling net zero emissions. So this is about countries, this is about companies, about cities, this is about individuals. So everyone has to have part to play. But what role is cities? Well, again, I want to reemphasize that 55% of global population lives in cities. So their closest level of government is the city government. In theory, your mayor, has to be responsible to you. You are the one that votes your mayor in or votes your mayor out. So, this is something that mayors are a little bit more connected to this issue. Also, when we talk about extreme weather events or even the COVID crisis, cities are the most places. So, the local level has an extremely important role to play because it is both government, but it is also many negotiation spaces, it is not considered national government. So it can play a little bit of a different kind of more provocative role in terms of, we need to be able to act here. We need the autonomy to act because in many countries, even in Sweden, where I'm coming from, the city needs to ask the national government for permission on certain issues to act. So cities need to be given the mandate in order to really act, to provide the right kind of transportation or energy systems, to support the rollout of better green spaces and more resilient communities. But they also need the money, money like the taxes that we collect. Sometimes those don't go to the city, and they need to go to the city in order to really roll out and test some of these new ways of working. But it's also about partnership, and partnership is crucial, whether it's working with, for example, universities to try new innovative ideas, or partnering with a company to say, I want to work with you to employ many more or more solar panels. So there's, all of these different places of connection. And something else to say is that, remember, humanity has always been an urban species. Since we started gathering, after we were running around and, hunting and gathering, once we started creating communities, we started creating cities. They were, very simple initially with a small market center, maybe a religious center, and homes and housing. But we did not create the nation state for, I think, until probably 200 to 300 years ago, if you look at depending on which theory. But we have always been an urban species. And this has been important both for learning, for trade, for connection. Has been a lot of the reason that bring people to the city, and certainly nowadays for jobs and opportunities.
Should we reduce greenhouse gas emission to zero? Is it possible, you think?
I think the question was, is it possible to really reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by such a extreme measure? Is that
to zero, basically? Can we do that?
Is it possible? Yes, it's certainly possible if we put a willingness in order to do so. Right now, it's the time to create a story and a vision of where we want to go and how we can get there together. At WWF, our motto is Together Possible. Juntos es posible. And we really believe that it is possible if we find everyone's individual and collective contribution. So one of the key ideas that is happening both in terms of businesses, but especially in cities, is this idea of circularity. In nature, there is no waste, and waste is always a resource. And why can't we design our cities like this? I mean, recycling is a perfect example of that, or composting. If you take your food waste and you use it to make new soil for your garden or for your park, this is your local soils. If we talk about, secondhand clothing or secondhand furniture, this is also part of the circular economy. Or if we talk about borrowing a city bicycle or a car. I don't have a car here in Santiago, but we have a local car share system that we have access to. So all of these ideas show that, you can really reduce quite significantly your impact, but it's crucially about infrastructure and what is actually out there. We don't want to put too much pressure on the individual to feel like everything has to be up to you, that you have to recycle, that you have to turn your lights off, that you have to become a vegetarian tomorrow. It's also about having the right kind of systems so that you have access to better food choices, that you have access to better energy, that you have access to live in safe communities where you feel safe in order to get on your bike or get on the bus. All of these things, it's a connection between the individual, but it's also the role of the government and also the role of the private sector. And what can we do as individuals? we can gather together and we can demand that we want to live in these kinds of places that have cleaner air, that have cleaner water, that have more accessibility, that are safer communities with, jobs, local jobs for a more resilient economy. All of these things are connected.
Jennifer, I have a question, and I remember in Habitat that we talked about this, which is sometimes in Latin America, the issue that we have is that many people say we have so many issues in the social area that climate change is not something that we can work on. So that was one of my frustrations when I talked to many mayors in the times I worked with you. Their response was that, right? So we don't have the resources, we don't have the people to work on this. They remember that they even closed their departments of environment, their environmental departments in many of the municipalities that we work with. So how do we tackle this? Because I do understand that climate change is a social issue. It's not only an environmental issue, but how do we work with that? I would say like that argument, because that's complicated. And that is one of the things, for example, in Quito, right now they are building a system for bicycle, a really long, a very well done a bicycle system, but people push for the car. They're like, I want to be in my car, I want to use my car. And at the same time, the municipality feels like we're investing in this, but people are not reacting. So all of these things come to a problem when they need to act as a municipality. People don't want to do it. I don't have the resources. How do we act with that?
Absolutely. Well, I think so many times it's framed as either focus on social issues or focus on environmental issues. But there is a very clear connection, especially when we talk about environmental justice. For example, the right to clean air, the right to clean water, the right to good shelter. These are as much environmental issues as they are social issues. A city like Santiago, for example, has in many senses beautiful green spaces, but those are not always equally accessible. And what is green space? It's very important for for mental health, but it's also important for your physical health, and certainly in order to temper both this crisis of urban heat island, the really exhalation of the temperatures in cities, but also when it talks about air pollution. So, this is part of it. We can talk about the role of nature and the ecosystem services in order to provide cleaner water. This is also something. Cleaner water, air pollution has actually, according to initial studies by the WHO, the World Health Organization, as well as the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, air pollution actually can impact children's ability to learn. So this is extremely a social issue as well as a health issue as much as an environment issue. So we have to stop seeing it as either or. There's also a great report that just came out when we talk about COVID recovery plans. And I believe it's in Spanish as well, but I can definitely send you the English copy.
So we can put it here, yeah.
Absolutely. But it's looking at a recovery plan, a green recovery plan in cities, and looking at how investments in brown infrastructure, so kind of conventional infrastructure versus green infrastructure, how many more jobs, local jobs that we can create if we start investing in the kinds of infrastructure that are good for the environment, but also very good for social resilience, for jobs, for a more stable local economy. Paris recently came up with this idea of what they call a 15-minute city. And the 15-minute city is the idea that within 15 minutes, everything that you need in kind of your daily life, so your shopping, your restaurants, your cultural activities, your schools, your hospitals, are within 15 minutes of walking or cycling. So if we have access to a 15-minute city, then we don't need, maybe we have a car for the weekend, maybe we have a car for special opportunities. Certainly, myself, I'm not saying I'm not anti-car, I'm pro-citizen. And I think we have to start creating cities for people, not cities for cars, so that people can move around in their cities and really get to know their cities. A city like Amsterdam such a resilient economy because it's always accessible. So if we start talking about accessibility and connection, this is very much a social issue. If you don't have access, think in Quito, if someone is living on the outskirts of the city but has to work in the center of the city, how many different times do they have to shift, between several different bus lines or sit in several different, maybe in their own car, but in so many hours of traffic? This is time that they could be spending with their family. This is time that they could be spending, sleeping, reading, relaxing, earning more money. All of these all become social issues at the end of it. So we have to stop framing them as either or. It's definitely both. And, obviously, like, COVID has put this so much more central. So many governments around the world are saying, we can't address both COVID and the climate. We have to address COVID first. Yes, we understand. And there is a huge urgency. But when we start to talk about recovery, how can we think of a recovery that benefits people as well as the planet? And what I've seen here in Santiago, the emergence of the temporary bike lanes, and that we still also have a lot of people who love their cars. But there's also a strong interest to get on the bike and to actually move. We've been stuck in quarantining in our houses for so long. The ability to move outside, how that benefits your mental health as well as your physical health. We've also seen streets close to allow restaurants that have been so hardly hit to economically recover. So they close streets and they allow the tables, following all the protocols, 1 to 2 meters between tables, but allowing these local businesses to recover that have been so hardly hit. So now when we start to see that we can create a city for people, and that is good for the economy, and that is good for the economic development, but that we're also seeing drops in air pollution, reductions in traffic congestion. This is also good for the environment.
For example, here in our country, we don't have good public transport. People don't want to ride a bike, don't want to walk. So it's difficult here, I think. For some people, not to all.
So I'm going to tell you a personal story because I think that's kind of fun. So the very first time I came to Santiago, my now mother-in-law said to me, "So, what do you think that my son does not own a car?" As though this was going to be an issue for me. And I said, "Well, I haven't owned a car for so many years. I mean, I only go around my city in Stockholm on a bicycle, and I lived in Amsterdam for many years before. And I love cycling. I think it's a great way to see your city, to interact with your city, to connect, save money for sure, not have to go to the gym. And yeah, I think it's great that he's showing that his conviction and that you can live in the city without owning a car." So that was her first question. Okay, so because it is very much a status symbol sometimes. I've made it in this world. I can own a car. I can move around in my city with a car. And again, it's not to say that it's against having cars, but to be dependent on it. And I think this is where we can really talk about new messaging. I spent a lot of my childhood in the United States, which is our focused society. And people talk about independence, but the reality is they are so dependent on moving around in the car that, what if you can let go of that? The freedom that you can have by being able to move around, by not having to think, where is my car today? Or, if I want to go out to a restaurant and have a glass of wine or maybe two, I don't have to think about how I'm getting home if I'm walking home. Or maybe I'm cycling home a little bit excited, hopefully not too excited, of course. But we have to start reconnecting on how we actually move around our cities, where we decide we want to put our resources. Some of this is, also how we plan our cities. So one thing to add here, which I think is so mind-blowing for me, is that between 40 and 60% of public spaces in cities, so that's about half or more than half, are dedicated to cars. So people walk around on these narrow sidewalks and, you barely have room to move, and yet we give space to cars. in terms of roads, in terms of highways, in terms of parking lots. What if we recreated our cities with better public spaces for people, especially in the time of COVID? What if we made pop-up parks? So we allowed people to be outside, to exercise, to experience urban nature, or, you know, to exercise, all of these things. But we really have to think about how much space and how much planning are we giving to cars? And it's cars, it's not people, it's cars for most of the time that we actually have them.
You're right. And it's super interesting, because one of the things that has been an issue here, and I think that's where Daniela was going, because it's been an ongoing issue for the past, I would say, a month or 2 months, that the bike lanes in Quito have been very, like the municipality is putting a lot of work on doing this whole bike lane around Quito. You would be amazed at how many they have built already. So that's amazing. But you have the anti-bike people. I don't ride a bike. I walk a lot. And you remember that when I was pregnant, I would walk everywhere with my big belly. Those numbers are so important, Jennifer, because 60% for cars, and they only represent, I think it's about like 10% or something of the whole mobility percentage. So most of the people, for example, in Quito, I know those numbers because I think 70 or 80% use public transportation, and they use, they are not called pedestrians, but they do identify as pedestrians, not as public transportation, which is something that is pretty weird, because municipalities are always talking about this public transportation, but most of these people walk a lot. So they only use the public transportation for certain parts of their journey, which is pretty interesting because they could use a bike too. But again, is this idea of giving so much space to car and so much space to something that is actually not the big percentage of people. It's not for the citizens. It's for a small group of citizens.
One thing that, you know, on this topic that I find really interesting is, well, I told you I used to live in Amsterdam. And Amsterdam is such a fantastic city. I mean, it's the cycling king city together with Copenhagen and Denmark. So these two cities are always trying to say, oh, no, we have more bikers. No, we have more bikers. But it's transportation and it's cool. And, you know, the prime minister goes to work on the bicycle. All the businessmen go to work on the bicycle. The grandmothers go around on the bicycle. The kids going to parties, you know, you can be in fancy high heels and you're going out to a concert and you go on the bicycle. And then you see so much dynamic urban life when you're out, you know, because you're always interacting with your city. You're always interacting with your citizens. And every time I got on my bike when I lived in Amsterdam, I fell in love with the city again. I thought, what a beautiful place to live. You know, every bridge has flowers on it because there's more space to do these things at the human scale. It's not about just the cars. Now, I know Quito is a very hilly city. So, I also know that there are some amazing, really cool it's in Quito as well. And I have so much respect for them. And I cycled around your gorgeous city with some of them, up and down those hills. And, you know, I didn't think I'd make it, but I did. But it's a really impressive place. Now, we can't call every city the same. You have to find the right system. And I think when we talk about transportation, for me, it's not just talking about transportation. It's not just talking about climate, although transportation is roughly 25% of global emissions. That's not only city transportation, but a lot of that is in cities. So this is a huge area where we can make a big change when we talk about the climate crisis. But it's also then about how cities are planned. If cities are planned around the bicycle or around walking, then they're designed at what we call the human scale. So this also goes back to the equity aspect and who has access. If we design cities around the car, this means that the distances are much further, this means it's harder for people who might not have access to a car, or if there's not very good public transportation connection. And it's also, you have this problem of urban sprawl. Now, one of the things I absolutely love about Quito is going up, and I think I've been to your city now 2 or 3 times, and I've done this every time, is take the teleférico up over the city and see all the beautiful nature that's just there. I mean, it's so, so close. I mean, if we really want to keep nature close to cities, we also have to think about the design of how we plan our cities. And of course, if we put transport planning central and human-centered transport planning central, then this also influences the whole design of a city. It's not to say that people shouldn't have access to their own private garden or, you know, their own homes. I know that that's really a desire, and myself too. I love gardening. So, you know, how do we plan that? But it doesn't always have to be that you do it in a very kind of disconnected fashion. Maybe we have these community gardens, or maybe we put more emphasis on going to parks, places where we can meet our neighbors. We move to cities for jobs, but we also move to cities to interact with people. So we need to create those spaces right now in a socially distanced fashion, but just in general, where people can really connect and enjoy the wonderful hobby of people watching, knowing who else is in your city with you.
Right. So there you are in the final question, which is the role of the citizens. So what is our role, and how can we become more active on this?
Well, I mean, what role can citizens play? It's kind of everything and anything at the same time. But before I say that, I want to emphasize that, you know, certainly we are all equal, but we're not all equal in terms of our impact. So I don't want to put too much on individuals, even though there is something to say. We also need to collectively, as individuals, call on our governments, keep companies accountable, and really look at where, you know, there has to be the right institutional mechanisms in order to create that change. So if you do everything right in your individual life, you know, if you turn your lights off, you have a solar panel, you use very little water, you on your bicycle, this is all absolutely wonderful, and it should definitely keep people empowered to be part of the change process. But a key part of that change process is also making sure that global leaders provide, and national leaders and local leaders provide those spaces so that we can do so. You know, I'm so inspired, and certainly as a Swedish person, but also as a global citizen, from what Greta Thunberg has been able to do with the school strikes, first in Sweden, and then in Europe, and then global. You know, really calling on getting young people to say, I'm not going to school until you teach me about what is really possible in our future. And so this shows the power of individuals collectively working together and calling on their politicians to create stronger change, to create stronger commitment. So, you know, it's about your individual choices, and that is crucial. Also for consistency, and frankly for healthier lifestyles, because many of these choices are better for you as an individual. But we have to also recognize the role of individuals together to create movements of change. Whether, again, I mean, Chile has been going through a very critical social movement in order to create change in this country. In the US, with the Black Lives Matter movement, has put not only in the United States, but also globally, to look at racial equality. All of these issues are connected. But what we see, whether we talk about Black Lives Matter or the social crisis in Chile, or the youth crisis, or the youth movements, is that collectively we can really make an impact when we start to get our voices heard. So that's what we go do out on the streets. And that's an important part when we bring attention to the issue. But then it's also important that we vote, that we participate in our democratic processes, and we are keeping our local leaders and our national leaders accountable. They have the right, or they have the power to really set the infrastructure that we have access to. And then it's also about, trying new recipes. Sometimes people say, I would be a vegetarian, but it's not really that interesting, the food choices. And I would completely disagree. It's just about having a little bit of creativity in what you want to eat. There are so many choices, especially now. Or, when you don't eat all your food and you have some leftover green waste, start a worm garden. It's super easy. I have one outside on my balcony. I would show you, but I know the connection isn't very good here. But it's quite fun to try a lot of these things. And I think especially with COVID, we've seen is a new willingness to try new recipes, to recycle things, to make sure that the full life cycle is used of a product. So there is a lot of new learning happening. The movements in our cities, we're seeing citizens are realizing, wow, this is how clean the air quality could be in my city if there were less cars, or if we cleaned up our industrial processes. So, remember that and keep that momentum and work together, because it's, the individual integrity of your decisions are important. And frankly, once you start to adopt certain behaviors, it's really exciting because you connect, like, wow, it's really not difficult to shift my diet or shift my energy. But if we do that together, this is where the power is.
Exactly.
I see hope after this interview. Work together.
We need to work together. And it's very inspiring to hear you, Jennifer, because one of the things that we usually say is that we have to change things from home. And I always say that because people feel they are not empowered enough to do things. So they usually say, I don't know what to do. And I'm so busy, many excuses that we put. But I think that when you feel like many people are doing it and you're part of this movement, it just becomes so easy to do it. And it's not to become very radical. And I remember I had a meeting with a vegan movement, a guy from a vegan movement, and he said, I'm not making you vegan. I'm just saying, just taste, just be vegan 2 days a week, and that's fine. But if you're part of this movement, we can share things. We can actually say, I have a really good recipe for this, and I compost at home. Maybe I can help you out with that. If you're scared about biking, let's bike together. Let's go together to work. So that idea, I think it's amazing. And it's something that we do feel it's the change that we need to make, which is we already had a bad moment with COVID. And I think we did understand that we need to work together and we need to be more a team rather than these individual people just earning money everywhere and doing things by themselves. I think it's a time, the change right now, which is COVID is making us change, is that we need to be together and we need to go through this together, because we are one with each other. And once we understand that, then we can move to another type of system, which is the one that I think it's breaking in this 2020. I think 2021 will be a new era for many people.
Yes. Thank you very, very much, Jennifer, for sharing with us here in Green Anatomy. I see hope a lot. And yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. It was
My pleasure.
It was amazing to have you here. I am happy to see you again. I only see you in pictures now, but I'm happy to see you again. Thank you for taking the time and for making it so easy. I remember you would make me understand things so easily. So I'm happy that people that can hear you here will be amazed at how good you make us understand how it works. So thank you so much.
And I'm going to show you, just before we go, I'm going to show you my worm bin, because like you said, it's just about sometimes knowing that this is possible. So here you can see my, I'm in the way. This is my worm bin. And here you can see our worms. Just there.
Working.
So it's that easy.
Working.
It's amazing. I have a compost in my house, and I live in an apartment, and I know it's easy to do it.
Yes.
So let's do it. Let's just work together.
Thank you. Thank you, Fer.
And remember that you can hear here, then you can hear in Spotify, iTunes, and in our Instagram. Thank you, Jennifer. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Gracias por ser parte de un episodio más de Anatomía Verde. Si te gustó esta entrevista, no te olvides dejarnos tus comentarios. Y recuerda seguirnos en Facebook y también en YouTube como Anatomía Verde.